next we need to make our caramel. Now caramel is nothing more than sugar that's been boiled to a ridiculously high temperature, at least 280 degrees. We're also going to add heavy cream to this. This recipe calls for 1.5 cups of sugar and 1.5 cups of heavy cream. Now take a look at the amount of this stuff here, and take a look at the size of the pot that I'm planning on cooking this in. That's intentional. You want to have a large pot to cook caramel in, especially if you're going to be adding dairy, heavy cream in the cooking process, because when we put this dairy into this screamingly hot sugar, it's going to bubble up pretty violently. So my recommendation is to have a pot that's perhaps 2 or 3 times larger than you would normally use to boil, this amount of ingredients, and that way you're not going to have any boilovers. Because this stuff is going to get ridiculously hot, it's always a good idea to have a container of ice water with you, so that if you do get some on you, if it splashes on you like candy napalm, you can put your hand in the water and that should alleviate any kind of burn that you have. Okay, let's get started. Into this pot, I'm going to put in about 1/2 cup of water. Also about 2 tablespoons of Caro syrup. That's a little insurance policy to make sure we get the right kind of texture in our finished caramel. It'll keep it from getting grainy on us. If you want to know why that happens, I'll tell you in another episode. We're also going to add our 1.5 cups of sugar. When you're making caramel, it's helpful to put the water in the pot first and then put the sugar in. What that does for you is keeps the sugar, dry sugar, from getting stuck to the bottom of the pot, which can then potentially burn on you. So, all I'm going to do is stir this around before I apply any heat, so that it's the consistency of wet sand. And what I mean by that is that there's no dry sugar in there. And you can see what I mean, that everything is mixed pretty well there. Okay. There we go. Now, the key to making caramel is to leave it alone. Just let it boil. This is going to take about 8 to 10 minutes. It might take a different amount of time for you, depending on the strength of your burner on your home stove. Now, as we go through this cooking process, I'm going to give you a couple of tips to make sure you get a really good caramel. Now we just sit and wait. So our caramel's been boiling for about a minute now. Let's take a look at what's happening in the pot. You'll see that the bubbles are pretty small right now. You'll see that the caramel itself is still very clear. We haven't developed any color. Let me give you one other tip when you're making caramel. I'm going to turn the pot so you can see. Can you see over here where there's sugar along the side of the pot? That could have a tendency to burn. So all I'm taking is a little silicone brush that's got some water on it, and I'm wiping it down. And what that's going to do is make sure that nothing burns and that we get a nice evenly covered caramel. This now is exactly where I want to be. I've got that nice caramel color. I've got a really good smell. Again, think amber beer. It's time to add our heavy cream. Don't do this all at once. Add it a little bit at a time, and make sure you've got something that's heat-proof to stir with. So you can see how this has bubbled up pretty significantly. And if we had a smaller pot, that could have been trouble. That could have been all over your stove. Add a little bit more. And here's the last of the heavy cream. Now I'm just going to let this cook for maybe 30 minutes or so, 30 seconds or so. And all I'm doing is making sure that the water has evaporated from the cream. And that's done. I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm going to add just a dash of vanilla. Very calibrated dash. I would call that maybe a 1/2 teaspoon. And now I'm going to pour it into a bowl and get it into the refrigerator. Okay, stop. So you may wonder why I'm not taking this gorgeous caramel that I just made and pouring it immediately into the chocolate to get the chocolate to melt. The reason for that is chocolate's kind of persnickety and it doesn't want to get too hot. When I say too hot, you should never get chocolate over about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So if I poured this super hot caramel in there, we would ruin our chocolate. In essence, what would happen is we get a very grainy texture to our chocolate caramel sauce, which is something we don't want. Still edible, still tasty, it'd just be grainy and not so nice. So the way we're going to combat that is to simply refrigerate the caramel until it's down to about 110 degrees, maybe 115. So stick a thermometer in it and just watch it. It should take about 5 or 10 minutes in the freezer. If it gets too cool, we can always heat it back up in the microwave. Caramel onto our chocolate, and then let it melt that chocolate. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Let it sit, maybe about a minute or so, and let the residual heat from the caramel do its thing. Now I'm going to stir it until smooth. And there you have it. Step 2 is done. We're ready for step 3, which is to actually make our little tarts. This is the easiest of the 3 steps. Just get yourself a ladle full of this creaminess and pour it into the tart shell. Do this slowly. You want it to rise up evenly. You don't want to get any of the chocolate sauce along the edge of it because then it won't be pretty. There's one that's done. Grab some more. There it goes. Oops. And now, you might think that this is ready to eat now, but it's not. I'm going to make you wait a little bit more just for this ganache, for this chocolate caramel sauce to set up, to cool down to room temperature. Step 2 is done. We're ready for step 3, which is to actually make our little tarts. This is the easiest of the 3 steps. Just get yourself a ladle full of this creaminess and pour it into the tart shell. Do this slowly. You want it to rise up evenly. You don't want to get any of the chocolate sauce along the edge of it because then it won't be pretty. There's one that's done. Grab some more. There it goes. Oops. And now, you might think that this is ready to eat now, but it's not. I'm going to make you wait a little bit more just for this ganache, for this chocolate caramel sauce to set up, to cool down to room temperature. So an hour has gone by through the magic of YouTube. Again, you haven't seen a second of it. It's time for the big reveal. Here's our finished tart. Look at the nice sheen, the nice gloss across the top of this thing. Let's go in for a taste. And I'm going to start with just a mouthful of this chocolate caramel. Look at how decadent that is. So, you get a lovely chocolate flavor. You get all the caramel flavor. You get a little bit of vanilla. It's really rich and satisfying. I'm going to have to stop talking to you and just keep eating this. So this is a decadent dessert, and I certainly encourage you to try it with someone that you love. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to continue to eat this because it's really darn tasty. So thanks for watching. From our kitchens, I'm Leanne Cordisco. I'll see you next time.